The Stanley Cup playoff participants are now set after a wild night in the NHL last night. So here's the scenario. Philadelphia needs a regulation win. They also need a regulation loss for the Detroit Red Wings if they are going to have a snowball's hope in hell of making the playoffs. And as the night was winding down, Detroit is trailing Montreal with 7 seconds left. Philadelphia needs a regulation win. And so, with the game tied at 1 with 3 minutes to go, John Tortorella summons Urson to the bench, who, by the way, has played quite well for a Philadelphia team that rather abruptly saw their goaltending situation change over the last 6 months or so. But neither here nor there. He summons his goalie to the bench. They are going with the extra attacker to try to win this hockey game. And they get the puck in, get a shot on goal. It is stopped. Washington is sliding it up the ice. And basically, as Tortorella is being like, hey, goalie, come here. The Detroit Red Wings, in their game, score with 3 seconds left to tie the game, basically eliminating Phil, or not basically, absolutely 100% eliminating Philadelphia from playoff contention. So at that point, the aggressive move seems to mean nothing if you're following all this in real time, and it ends up coming back to bite them, I suppose, as TJ Oshie races down the right wing side and puts one into the empty net, sealing away, assumably, sealing away a victory for the Washington Capitals. And they do eventually go on to win 2-1. So there has been criticism today that, John Tortorella, he's pulling the goalie, and then they have no chance of making the playoffs. It's like, look, first of all, what does he care? If this gave Detroit a fighting chance or not. He's eliminated whether that goal goes in or not. So what does he care? He's not more eliminated if a goal goes in on a goalie or not. So that part of it is weird. But I would assume, all day was preaching just focus on this game. Whatever happens elsewhere, we just focus on our stuff. And so the part of this scenario that he could control, or, the closest he could control, was his team winning a game in regulation. That needed to happen for this to be a successful venture for the Philadelphia Flyers. So he was doing everything he could to win a game in regulation. The timing of it stinks for Detroit, because if Philadelphia goes on to win that game, then Detroit is sitting in the driver's seat for a postseason spot. And then Philadelphia, it basically looks like they're just giving it away to allow Washington to get this win. I think any criticism of Torts is assuming that there is a level of paying attention to the results that there probably just wasn't. He got the note from his video guys after, Detroit scored, so we're eliminated. It's like, okay, well, whatever, so go out and try to win a hockey game. He was controlling the one part of this scenario that he could control the most. And so I have no problem with Tortorella pulling the goalie and going for it there and just giving it a go. The fact that it basically eliminated Detroit, I don't think should matter to him even a little bit. So credit Washington, they get in. Lindgren has been an MVP for them. You look at the stretch here. When they needed it the most, he comes up with 4 wins in his last 5 starts. 42 saves against Detroit. Kind of a big game now, in hindsight, where they win that one. He has a bit of a shaky one. I believe it was against Buffalo. Bounces back. 32 saves against Tampa Bay. Again, big game. That team's sitting in the first wildcard spot. A 16 save shutout against Boston. And then to close out the season, 27 saves in a victory over Philadelphia. Ovechkin is the star. Oshie is a very talented player. Carlson gets headlines too. This team doesn't get close to this spot if Lindgren isn't incredible. Basically, since the trade deadline, he's only lost a few times. He has been phenomenal in this resurgence for Washington. Now, I don't think it's going to mean a lick in the playoffs, but credit to Washington for being able to get in. It's like Philadelphia was a real feel-good story for a lot of the season. I think this offseason is going to be really, 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 really interesting when you have all these teams that are going to be looking to step up, right? Philadelphia's right there. Detroit feels like they're right there. New Jersey has to feel like they are right there. Washington and Pittsburgh are clinging to right there status. And then you have Ottawa is probably looking to move up. Buffalo is looking to advance. So I think the offseason, specifically in the East, is going to be wild. And you're going to have a couple of teams that fancy themselves contenders losing pretty early and much earlier than they would have thought. So I do feel like this offseason is going to be bananas. out east. Also in the Eastern Conference last night, the Boston Bruins, and it's something we've talked about on this show for a few days now. The Bruins are sleepwalking to the finish, and they may have sleepwalked into the perfect scenario for them, because I was really worried about Boston that they wouldn't be able to flip that switch and they would have Tampa Bay in the first round. And Vasilevsky's playing well. Kucherov is a Hart Trophy candidate. Point. All he does is score big goals in the postseason and on down the line. And I was ready to pick Tampa Bay over Boston. So Boston, what do? They continue to play crappy, and they end up getting the Leafs in the first round, who they big brothered this season. And I'm going to have to do a deeper dive. I don't think Toronto can take advantage of Boston in the way that Tampa Bay could. And it's specifically because of Vasilevsky. The goaltending in Toronto has not been able to click in this last little stretch. They've had stretches this year where it's been able to really get them going. But this goaltending hasn't really been a thing for this team for a while. And so I don't think they have what it takes to take advantage of the sleepiness of Boston. Now, I do think that they have this in the NBA. I'm assuming they have it for NHL as well, or they will. I do think a Toronto to win game one, Boston to win the series bet would be really interesting, because I do think that the Leafs are going to come out flying and kind of catch the Bruins unawares a touch and pick up a win in game one. And then Boston's going to be like, oh, well, that's hilarious, and just pound that nail into the ground. Like, I think this is really a bad matchup for Toronto, that Boston just kind of worked their way into, or not even worked their way, just slept their way into. And now for Florida, they end up with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so it sucks for the Bolts too, because I don't think that Tampa Bay is on Florida's level at this point. I think like the goaltending thing, where Vasilevsky could steal a couple, Bobrovsky is right there to be able to steal it. And where, okay, well, you got to worry about Kucherov and Point. Well, you got to worry about like 15 guys on Florida. They are just a better team. So I think that the way this all shook out, it was setting up where, like, I think Florida probably also beat Toronto. But Tampa Bay had a shot at an upset, and I think Toronto, just style of play, has a touch of a better chance against Florida, but maybe not. But this one, the way it all shook out was kind of best case scenario, I think, for the top two teams in the Atlantic Division. So still quite a bit to figure out, though, in the West, and that will happen over the next couple of days.